In the small and peaceful town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow pace. The mornings were filled with the smell of fresh bread from the local bakery, and the afternoons saw children playing in the park under the watchful eyes of their parents. It was a place where everyone knew each other, and strangers stood out like a sore thumb. So when John arrived, people noticed him right away. He was an American man with short brown hair and a calm but mysterious demeanor. Alongside him was Lavra, a woman with sharp features and an air of authority that made people uneasy. John and Lavra rented a small house on the edge of town, claiming to be researchers studying wildlife. They said they were writing a book about animals in rural areas, which seemed harmless enough. At first, no one paid them much attention. But as days turned into weeks, strange things began happening around Willow Creek. Power outages became frequent, and some residents reported hearing unusual noises coming from the forest late at night. Emily, a young mother who lived nearby, started noticing vans parked near the woods. These vans had no markings, and the people inside never spoke to anyone. One evening, while walking her dog, Emily overheard part of a conversation between John and Lavra. She hid behind a tree, her heart pounding as she listened. They were talking about something big, something dangerous. "We need to move faster," Lavra said in a low voice. "The others are waiting for us to act." John nodded, his expression serious. "If we can get the equipment set up by next week, we'll be ready." Emily didn't understand everything they were saying, but one phrase stuck in her mind: a war against humans. Terrified, Emily ran home and told her husband Daniel what she had heard. Daniel was a practical man, not easily swayed by rumors or fears, but even he couldn't ignore the seriousness of what Emily described. "Are you sure you heard them correctly?" he asked, frowning. Emily nodded quickly. "I'm certain. They're planning something terrible, Daniel. We have to find out what it is." The next day, Emily shared her concerns with Sarah, a kind-hearted schoolteacher who lived down the street. Sarah listened carefully, her blue eyes wide with worry. "This doesn't sound good," she said softly. "But we can't just accuse them without proof. Maybe we should keep an eye on them for now." Emily agreed, and together they decided to investigate further. Over the following days, Emily and Sarah took turns watching John and Laura's house. They noticed that Rachel, a quiet woman who worked at the local cafe, visited them often. Stephen, a mechanic known for being friendly and helpful, also stopped by frequently. Neither Rachel nor Stephen seemed like bad people, but their involvement with John and Lavra raised suspicions. Something was clearly going on, and it involved more than just two outsiders. Meanwhile, Matthew, a farmer whose land bordered the forest, began noticing strange activity near his property. Bright lights appeared in the sky above his fields at night, and once he swore he saw figures moving among the trees. He mentioned this to Olivia, his neighbor, during one of their morning chats. "It's like they're testing something," Matthew said, scratching his head. "Whatever it is, it can't be good." Olivia nodded, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "We need to figure out what's going on before it's too late," she replied. Her words echoed what many in Willow Creek were beginning to feel: a growing sense of unease that something dark was brewing just beneath the surface dot. As the days passed, the townspeople grew increasingly suspicious. Strange equipment started appearing in the woods, and some claimed to have seen unfamiliar faces lurking around town. Benjamin, a young man who spent most of his time tinkering with gadgets, joined forces with Patricia, a former scientist with a reputation for being brilliant but morally questionable. Together, they worked tirelessly in secret, their actions shrouded in mystery. Andrew, a charismatic speaker who could charm anyone, traveled from house to house, trying to recruit more people to their cause. Sarah, unable to shake off her curiosity, decided to explore the forest herself. Armed with a flashlight and determination, she ventured deep into the woods one night. What she found left her breathless. Hidden among the trees was a makeshift camp filled with advanced machinery and tools she couldn't identify. Men and women in lab coats moved about, their faces tense with concentration. In the center of it all stood John and Lara, overseeing the operation like generals preparing for battle. Shaken, Sarah hurried back to town to warn the others. "They're building weapons," she told Emily and Daniel when she finally caught her breath. "Advanced ones. And they've been experimenting on animals, maybe, even people." Her revelation sent shockwaves through the community. For weeks, fear had been simmering beneath the surface, but now it erupted into full-blown panic. Daniel called a meeting at the town hall, where everyone gathered to discuss what to do next. Opinions varied, but one thing was clear: they couldn't let John and his group continue unchecked. "We have to stop them," Daniel declared, his voice firm. "Not with violence, but by exposing their plans to everyone." The townspeople agreed, and a plan was formed. Led by Daniel, a group of volunteers prepared to confront John and his followers. Among them were Emily, Sarah, Matthew, and Olivia, each driven by a desire to protect their home and loved ones. Armed with nothing but courage, they marched into the forest, determined to put an end to the madness. When they reached the hidden camp, they found John and Lara standing side by side, their expressions calm despite the angry crowd surrounding them. "You don't understand," John began, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "This isn't about destruction. It's about survival. Humanity has brought this world to the brink of collapse. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left for future generations." His words fell flat. The townspeople refused to accept his twisted logic. Instead, they dismantled the equipment piece by piece, ensuring no harm could come from it. With their operation exposed and their plans thwarted, John, Lara, and their followers retreated, disappearing as mysteriously as they had arrived. Though peace returned to Willow Creek, the memory of those tense days lingered. For Emily, Daniel, Sarah, and the rest of the community, it served as a reminder of how fragile trust could be and how vital it was to stand together in the face of danger. Life slowly returned to normal, but the scars of the past would always remain etched into the hearts of those who had fought to protect their home. After the strange group led by John and Lara disappeared from Willow Creek, life seemed to return to normal. The townspeople went back to their daily routines, but a shadow of unease lingered over the community. Emily found herself glancing at the forest every time she walked her dog, half expecting to see bright lights or hear unfamiliar noises again. Daniel tried to reassure her that it was over, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The makeshift camp in the woods had been dismantled, but no one knew what had happened to the equipment, or where John and his followers had gone. Sarah, who had first discovered the hidden operation, spent hours lying awake at night thinking about what she had seen. The advanced machinery and tools still puzzled her. She couldn't understand how such technology could exist in a small town like Willow Creek. It felt like something out of a science fiction movie, not reality. One evening, she decided to visit Matthew, the farmer whose fields had been near the site of the mysterious activity. She hoped he might have noticed something new since the group's departure. When Sarah arrived at Matthew's farm, she found him sitting on his porch, staring into the distance. "Have you seen anything unusual lately?" she asked after exchanging greetings. Matthew shook his head slowly. "Not since they left, but I can't stop thinking about those lights in the sky. They weren't normal, Sarah. Nothing about them made sense." His voice trailed off, and for a moment, both of them sat in silence, lost in thought. The next day, Olivia stopped by Sarah's house with news. She had spoken to Rachel, the cafe worker who had visited John and Laura frequently before they vanished. According to Rachel, she hadn't known much about their plans, but had agreed to help because Stephen, the mechanic, had convinced her it was important. She said they talked about saving the planet, Olivia explained, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. But when she realized they were building weapons, she backed out. She hasn't seen any of them since. This revelation only deepened the mystery. If Rachel and Stephen had been part of the group, why had they stayed behind while the others fled? And where had John, Lavra, and the rest gone? The questions weighed heavily on everyone's minds, but there were no answers to be found. Meanwhile, Benjamin and Patricia, the two individuals who had worked closely with John and Lavra, also seemed to have vanished without a trace. No one knew where they had gone, or whether they had taken the dismantled equipment with them. Some speculated that they might have moved to another location to continue their work, but there was no evidence to support this theory. Andrew, the charismatic speaker who had recruited people for the group, was nowhere to be seen either. It was as if they had all disappeared into thin air. Despite the lack of answers, life in Willow Creek slowly began to feel safer. Children returned to playing in the park, and the bakery resumed its usual morning rush. But beneath the surface, tensions remained. People avoided talking about what had happened, afraid of stirring up old fears. Even so, whispers spread whenever someone mentioned John or Laura's name. One afternoon, while walking through the woods, Emily stumbled upon something that sent chills down her spine. Hidden under a pile of leaves was a small device, unlike anything she had ever seen. It looked like a combination of a camera and some kind of sensor, with blinking lights and wires running across its surface. Her heart raced as she picked it up and examined it closely. Could this be part of the equipment John and Lavra had been using? Emily rushed home and showed the device to Daniel. He studied it carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to show this to someone who knows more about technology," he said finally. They decided to take it to Benjamin's workshop, hoping he might have left behind clues about how the device worked. Though Benjamin was gone, his workshop remained untouched, filled with gadgets and tools that hinted at his expertise. Inside the workshop, Daniel and Emily found blueprints scattered across a table. The designs were complex, showing diagrams of machines that resembled the one Sarah had described seeing in the forest. There were notes scribbled in the margins, written in a hurried hand. One phrase caught Emily's attention: Project Reset. She pointed it out to Daniel, who frowned deeply. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, shaking his head. "But it sounds like they were planning something big. Something that involved resetting the world, or at least part of it." As they continued searching the workshop, they discovered a journal belonging to Patricia. Its pages were filled with detailed observations and calculations, along with musings about humanity's impact on the planet. In one entry, she wrote about the need for drastic measures to restore balance to Earth. "Humans are destroying everything," she had scrawled angrily. "If we don't act now, there will be nothing left for future generations." The journal confirmed what John had said during their confrontation in the forest. The group truly believed they were doing the right thing, even if their methods were extreme. For Emily and Daniel, this realization was unsettling. How could anyone justify starting a war against their own species? Determined to learn more, they shared their findings with Sarah and Matthew. Together, the four of them pieced together fragments of information, trying to make sense of what had happened. They concluded that John and Laura's group must have been part of a larger organization, one with resources and connections far beyond Willow Creek. Perhaps they had chosen the town because of its isolation, believing no one would notice their activities until it was too late. But why had they left so suddenly? Had they abandoned their plans entirely, Or were they simply regrouping elsewhere? These questions haunted the townspeople, leaving them unable to fully relax. Every sound in the forest, every flicker of light in the sky, reminded them of the Ba, danger that had once threatened their peaceful lives. Over time, however, the memories began to fade. New families moved into town, and the stories of John and Lavra became little more than legends told around campfires. Yet, for those who had lived through the ordeal, the scars remained. Emily still checked the woods every evening, just in case. Sarah kept the journal and blueprints safely stored away, unsure whether to destroy them or preserve them as evidence. And Daniel often found himself staring at the horizon, wondering if the group would ever return. Though Willow Creek appeared to have healed, the underlying tension never completely disappeared. The townspeople had faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before, one driven by ideology rather than greed or revenge. It was a sobering reminder of how fragile peace could be, and how quickly trust could shatter when faced with uncertainty. Life went on, but the lessons learned during those dark days stayed with them forever, shaping the way they viewed the world and each other. Months passed since the mysterious group led by John and Lavra had vanished from Willow Creek, but the town was far from returning to its old self. The forest that once felt safe now seemed like a place of shadows and secrets. People avoided going too deep into the woods, and even the children who used to play there stayed closer to home. Emily and Daniel tried their best to move on, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, waiting. One crisp autumn morning, Matthew spotted something unusual near his fields again. At first, he thought it was just another animal, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't. It was a drone, small and sleek, hovering silently above the ground. Its surface shimmered in the sunlight, and it made no sound as it moved. Matthew's heart raced as he watched it dart between the trees before disappearing into the forest. He ran back to his house and called Sarah, who arrived within minutes. Sarah saw the drone. Her stomach tightened with dread. "This isn't normal," she said, her voice trembling. "Who would be using something like this here?" Matthew shook his head, unable to answer. They decided to follow the drone's path into the woods, hoping to find some answers. As they walked deeper into the forest, they noticed strange marks on the tree symbols, carved into the bark that looked almost like a code. The symbols led them to a clearing, where they found a pile of equipment hidden under a tarp. It was similar to what Sarah had seen in the makeshift camp months earlier, but smaller and more compact. There were wires, batteries, and devices that neither of them recognized. Among the items was a notebook filled with notes written in a language they didn't understand. Sarah took the notebook and tucked it into her bag, determined to show it to someone who might be able to decipher it. Back in town, they shared their discovery with Daniel and Emily. Together, they examined the notebook, flipping through its pages in silence. The writing was unlike anything they had ever seen, a mix of letters and symbols that seemed to form patterns. Daniel suggested taking it to Patricia's old workshop, hoping to find something there that could help them make sense of it. When they arrived at the workshop, they searched every corner until they stumbled upon a dusty bookshelf filled with technical manuals and journals. One of the books caught Emily's eye, a thick volume titled Advanced Symbolic Systems. Inside, she found a section on decoding unknown languages. Using the methods described in the book, they began working on the notebook late into the night. Slowly, they started piecing together fragments of meaning. The notes spoke of a plan called Phase 2, which involved testing new technology in remote areas. The final goal was unclear, but one phrase stood out: humanity's reckoning. The phrase sent shivers down their spines. It sounded like a continuation of the same twisted ideology Jean and Lavra had preached about, a belief that humanity needed to be controlled or reset for the sake of the planet. But who was behind it now? And why were they targeting Willow Creek again? As days turned into weeks, more strange occurrences happened around town. Power flickered unpredictably, and several people reported seeing figures moving in the forest at night. Rachel, the cafe worker, claimed she heard voices coming from the woods while walking home one evening. Stephen, the mechanic, disappeared for 2 days without explanation, only to return looking pale and shaken. When asked where he had been, he refused to talk about it. The tension in Willow Creek grew unbearable. People began locking their doors at night and keeping flashlights handy. Sarah and Emily organized meetings at the town hall, urging everyone to stay vigilant. "We need to protect ourselves," Sarah said firmly. "If they're planning something, we can't let them catch us off guard again." The townspeople agreed, forming groups to patrol the area and report anything suspicious. One night, while patrolling the edge of the forest, Matthew and Olivia stumbled upon a group of people setting up equipment. They wore dark clothing and moved quietly, clearly trying not to draw attention. Matthew recognized one of them. It was Andrew, the charismatic speaker who had recruited people for John and Laura's group. His presence confirmed their worst fears. The same organization was back, and they weren't done yet. Matthew and Olivia retreated quickly, alerting the others as soon as they reached town. Together, they devised a plan to confront the intruders. Armed with flashlights and determination, a group led by Daniel and Sarah marched into the forest. When they reached the site, they found Andrew standing beside a large machine humming with energy. Surrounding him were several men and women, their faces tense with focus. "What are you doing here?" Daniel demanded, stepping forward. Andrew smiled faintly, his expression calm despite the angry crowd surrounding him. "You wouldn't understand," he said softly. "This is bigger than all of us. If we don't act now, the world will collapse under the weight of human greed." His words echoed John's earlier speech, and they struck a chord with some of the townspeople. For a moment, doubt crept into their minds, but Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "Even if your intentions are good, you can't force change like this. You're scaring people, hurting them. This isn't the way." Her words resonated with the others, and slowly the townspeople closed in, refusing to back down. Realizing they were outnumbered, Andrew and his group began dismantling the machine. Without saying another word, they packed up their equipment and disappeared into the night. Though they had driven the intruders away, the victory felt hollow. The townspeople knew the threat wasn't gone for good. Whoever was behind the operation had resources and determination, and they wouldn't give up easily. For now, life in Willow Creek returned to a fragile sense of normalcy. But the memories of what had happened lingered like a shadow. Emily and Daniel kept the notebook and blueprints safely stored away, unsure whether destroying them would erase valuable evidence or keep dangerous knowledge out of the wrong hands. Sarah continued teaching at the school, but she spent her evenings researching advanced technologies and decoding systems, hoping to learn more about the group's plans. Matthew kept watch over his fields, always alert for signs of trouble. And Olivia became the voice of reassurance in town, reminding everyone that they were stronger together. Willow Creek had faced an enemy unlike any other, one driven by ideals that blurred the line between right and wrong. Though the immediate danger had passed, the experience left a lasting mark on the community. Trust was harder to come by, and fear lingered beneath the surface. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was also resilience. The townspeople had stood together against a common threat, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, unity could prevail. As winter approached, snow blanketed the forest, covering the scars left behind by the mysterious group. But beneath the quiet beauty of the season, questions remained unanswered. Who were they really? Where had they gone? And would they ever return? For now, the people of Willow Creek could only wait and hope that the storm had passed for good. The winter in Willow Creek was colder than usual, with snow piling high on rooftops and icy winds biting at anyone who ventured outside. Despite the frosty weather, life in the town carried on as best it could. The townspeople tried to focus on their daily routines, but the lingering unease from the events of the past months made it hard to feel truly at ease. Emily bundled up her children tightly before sending them off to school, always reminding them not to wander too far from home. Daniel spent his evenings by the fireplace, staring into the flames as if searching for answers that wouldn't come. One morning, Sarah received a letter slipped under her door. It was handwritten in shaky but deliberate handwriting, and its contents sent a chill through her. "They are watching," it read. "Tell no one or risk everything." There was no signature, no clue about who had written it. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the paper, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this a warning? A threat? Or just someone trying to scare her? She decided to show it to Daniel and Emily first thing in the morning. When they gathered at Daniel's house later that day, the three of them studied the note carefully. "Who could have left this?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel frowned deeply. "It's hard to say. Could be someone who knows more about what happened, or someone trying to unsettle us." They agreed not to tell the others unless absolutely necessary, fearing it might cause panic. Instead, they kept their eyes open, watching for anything unusual. Over the next few days, strange things began happening around town again. Footprints appeared in the snow near the edge of the forest, too large to belong to any animal. Lights flickered in empty houses late at night, even though no one lived there anymore. Matthew noticed tracks leading away from his fields toward the woods, but when he followed them, they vanished abruptly, as if whoever had made them had disappeared into thin air. The sense of being watched grew stronger, pressing down on everyone. Like a heavy blanket, Olivia became especially uneasy after spotting a figure standing at the edge of the woods one evening. She was feeding birds in her backyard when she glanced up and saw someone watching her from the shadows. The person didn't move or speak, just stood there silently until Olivia called out to them. At the sound of her voice, the figure turned and melted into the trees. When she told Sarah about it, both women felt a deep sense of foreboding. "It's like they're testing us," Sarah said quietly, "seeing how much we can take before we break." Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah and Daniel decided to revisit Patricia's old workshop. They hoped to find anything that might explain why Willow Creek continued to be targeted. The workshop was cold and dark when they arrived, dust covering every surface. As they sifted through piles of papers and tools, they stumbled upon a hidden compartment beneath one of the workbenches. Inside was a small device resembling a USB drive and a folded map marked with red circles. The map showed locations across the country, each circle labeled with dates and notes. One of the circles was drawn around Willow Creek, with the date matching the time John and Lara had first arrived. Other circles were marked with future dates, suggesting that similar operations were planned elsewhere. The device, when plugged into Daniel's laptop, contained encrypted files that required a password to access. Frustrated but undeterred, they took the map and device back to Emily's house, where they worked together to decode the information. Meanwhile, Matthew and Olivia patrolled the forest regularly, keeping an eye out for intruders. One night, while walking along a narrow path, they heard voices echoing faintly through the trees. Moving cautiously, they crept closer until they reached a clearing. There, they found Andrew once again, surrounded by a group of people setting up equipment. This time, however, the machine in the center of the clearing looked different. It was larger and more complex, with wires connecting it to several smaller devices scattered around the area. Matthew and Olivia retreated quickly, hurrying back. to town to alert the others. Together, they devised a plan to confront the group before they could activate the machine. Armed with flashlights and courage, a group led by Daniel and Sarah marched into the forest. When they reached the clearing, they found Andrew standing beside the machine, his expression calm despite the angry crowd surrounding him. "You don't understand," he said softly. "This is for the greater good. If we don't act now, humanity will destroy itself." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "Even if your intentions are noble, you can't force change like this. You're hurting innocent people, scaring them. There has to be another way." Her words struck a chord with the townspeople, who closed in around the group, refusing to back down. Realizing they were outnumbered, Andrew signaled for his followers to dismantle the machine. Without another word, they packed up their equipment and disappeared into the night. Though they had driven the intruders away, the victory felt hollow. The map and encrypted files suggested that Willow Creek was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Whoever was behind the operation had resources and reach far beyond what anyone had imagined. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but the townspeople knew they couldn't let their guard down. Emily and Daniel kept the map and device safely stored away, unsure whether destroying them would erase valuable evidence or leave dangerous knowledge intact. Sarah continued decoding the files, spending long hours poring over the data in hopes of finding answers. Matthew kept watch over his fields, always alert for signs of trouble, and Olivia remained a source of strength for the community, reminding everyone that they were stronger together. As spring approached, the snow began to melt, revealing the scars left behind by the mysterious group. Yet beneath the thawing ground, questions lingered unanswered. Who were they really? What did they want? And would they ever return? For now, the people of Willow Creek could only wait and hope that the storm had passed for good. Though fear still lingered, so did resilience. The town had faced an enemy unlike any other, one driven by ideals that blurred the line between right and wrong. Through it all, they had stood united, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, unity could prevail. Spring arrived in Willow Creek, bringing with it warmer weather and the promise of renewal. The snow melted away, leaving behind damp earth and budding trees. Yet, despite the beauty of the season, the town remained weighed down by the events of the past. The scars left by John, Laura, and their followers were not just physical, but emotional as well. People walked a little slower, spoke a little softer, and looked over their shoulders more often than they used to. Emily found herself checking the windows every night before going to bed, while Daniel spent hours staring at the map and device. They had recovered, hoping to uncover anything that might bring clarity. Sarah worked tirelessly on decoding the encrypted files, her days blending into nights as she sat hunched over her computer. She had managed to unlock small fragments of information, enough to confirm that the group operating in Willow Creek was part of a larger network. The red circles on the map represented locations across the country where similar activities were, planned or already underway. Each circle corresponded to a date, some in the past and others in the future. One such location was marked for the coming month, a town called Pine Ridge, located several states away. Sarah shared this discovery with Daniel and Emily, who immediately understood its significance. "We can't ignore this," Daniel said firmly. "If we don't do something, they'll just keep moving from place to place, causing chaos wherever they go." Emily nodded in agreement, though her face showed traces of fear. "But what can we do? We're just ordinary people. How can we stop them?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We may be ordinary, but we've faced them before, and we've won. Maybe it's time to warn others, to let them know what's coming." The idea took root quickly. Together, They decided to travel to Pine Ridge ahead of the marked date, hoping to alert the townspeople and prevent another disaster. Matthew volunteered to go with them, offering his truck for the journey. Olivia stayed behind to keep an eye on things in Willow Creek, promising to contact them if anything unusual happened. Before leaving, they gathered supplies and made copies of the map and decoded files. Ensuring they had evidence to share. The drive to Pine Ridge was long and quiet, each passenger lost in their own thoughts. When they finally arrived, they found a town much like Willow Creek, small, peaceful, and seemingly untouched by the outside world. They began by visiting local businesses and speaking to residents, sharing their story and showing them the map. At first, many dismissed them as alarmists or conspiracy theorists. "Why would anyone target us?" one man asked skeptically. "We're nobody special." But as more details emerged, some began to take notice. Among those who listened was Rachel, a librarian with a sharp mind and a curious nature. She invited them to her house, where they spread out the map and explained everything they knew. Rachel studied the documents carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "This is real," she said finally. "They've been here before. A few months ago, strangers came to town asking questions about our water supply and electricity grid. No one thought much of it at the time, but now—" Her voice trailed off, and she looked at the group with determination. "We need to prepare." With Rachel's help, they organized meetings at the town hall, urging everyone to stay vigilant. They formed patrols, set up communication networks, and even reached out to neighboring towns to warn them. Word spread quickly, and soon Pine Ridge was buzzing with activity. Though some still doubted the threat, most agreed it was better to be safe than sorry. Sarah felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. Perhaps they could make a difference after all. As the marked date approached, tensions in Pine Ridge grew palpable. Lights were left on all night, and groups of volunteers kept watch around the clock. On the eve of the predicted event, Matthew spotted movement near the edge of the forest. Grabbing his flashlight, he crept closer, signaling for Daniel and Sarah to follow. What they found chilled them to the bone. A group of people unloading equipment from vans, parked under the cover of darkness. Among them was Andrew, his calm demeanor unchanged despite being caught in the act. "You shouldn't have come here," Andrew said softly when confronted. His tone was almost regretful, as if he truly believed his actions were justified. "This isn't your fight." Daniel stepped forward, his voice firm. "People are tired of living in fear. Whatever you're planning, it ends tonight." Behind him, the townspeople gathered, their numbers growing as word spread. Realizing they were outnumbered, Andrew signaled for his group to retreat. Without another word, they packed up their gear and vanished into the night. Though relieved, the victory felt bittersweet. The group had been stopped for now, but the map showed other locations marked for future operations. Sarah and Daniel knew their work wasn't done. As they prepared to return to Willow Creek, Rachel thanked them for their bravery. "You've given us a fighting chance," she said. "We'll stay ready, no matter what comes next." Back home, life resumed its fragile rhythm. Emily hugged her children a little tighter, grateful for their safety. Daniel continued studying the map, searching for patterns that might reveal the group's ultimate goal. Sarah wrote letters to officials and media outlets, hoping to expose the truth on a larger scale. Matthew tended to his fields, keeping an eye on the horizon. And Olivia remained the heart of the community, reminding everyone that strength lay in unity. Willow Creek had faced an enemy unlike any other, one driven by ideals that blurred the line between right and wrong. Through it all, the townspeople had stood together, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, resilience could prevail. The road ahead was uncertain, but for now, they held on to hope. Hope that their actions might inspire others to stand up and fight. Hope that someday The storm would pass for good,